Today's lesson, we're going to be focusing on word problems. Probably not everybody's favorite way to do math. However, in the real world, your mathematical problems that you're going to be solving are not going to be equations. They will always be real-world word problems. For example, how much pizza do you need to buy for your party? Which product offers the best value? How much do I need to save up to go on a trip? And just about anything you do in the kitchen requires that you're able to solve word problems. And the consequences of not being able to solve word problems in the real world can be extreme. They can be embarrassing. Perhaps you don't have enough food to feed all of your guests, or enough money to pay for the things you're purchasing. They could cause you to waste ingredients, or to make something that tastes horribly bad. Might even make you sick. Miscalculations could cause you to be stranded somewhere. Ultimately, if you don't know how to solve real world word problems, you're going to end up making a lot of bad decisions. And bad decisions rarely lead to happiness. On the other hand, if you do learn how to do word problems, you'll be making a lot of good decisions in your life, and that can definitely lead to happiness. Throughout the day, you make hundreds of decisions, thousands of decisions within a week. Many of those are based in math and require mathematical skills and knowledge to make them properly. Don't sell yourself short. You can do this. You're going to be making millions of decisions in your life. You can prepare yourself to make good ones by learning how to work real world problems and not be afraid of word problems. Today, I'm going to teach you all the strategies and tricks that I know to solve word problems. I realize that not all word problems are going to be the same. So I'm going to solve one for you here, and the next one you see will be completely different. So the strategies I'm going to teach you today are strategies that are universal and can be used in every real-world situation. Solving word problems is a skill. It's something you can get better at. The more you do, like anything else, the stronger you'll become at it. Using my strategies will help you with every word problem that you have to attack. Some of those word problems are going to be difficult and multi-stepped. You might have to do more than one step. It's going to take perseverance. Some of them will be difficult. Some you may not even be able to solve. But what I want you to do is continue to try and use the strategies I give you. Don't give up on them. Eventually you will get them. And with each one that you don't get, you will learn something from it. I know this is true because word problems was my least favorite thing to do in math. And it's actually become one of my most favorite things to do in math. It's because I have a strategy and I'm pretty good at solving them. I don't see word problems as a problem anymore. I see word problems as a puzzle, and I like puzzles. And I accept that challenge every time I see one. I don't get frustrated when I'm not getting it right away. I expect that they're going to be difficult. Some of them are. Some of them are actually rather quite easy. Let's begin with the word problem you see here. The first thing I do is kind of like what we do with close reading. I like to read the problem once through just to kind of get the gist of it. Karen bought a bag of flour. She used 2 3/4 cups for pizza dough and 4 1/3 cup for bread. If the new bag had 20 cups of flour, how much flour is left? At this point, I'm not too worried about what the question is asking or even what the question is about. But I've read it through now and I kind of understand now where I'm going to be using my first trick. My first trick is to personalize the problem. What I like to do is take the names and make them my name. So as I read this problem again, and I'm going to read it a second time now, a little bit slower as I want to start to grasp what the question is asking and what the situation is. And while I do it the second time, I'm going to cross out or mentally cross out Karen's name and put an I there because I want to be a part of this problem. So I'm going to read it again slowly now using I, and you can do that as well, and insert yourself into the problem. I bought a bag of flour. I used 2 3/4 cups for pizza dough, and I used 4 1/3 cups for bread. If the new bag had 20 cups of flour, how much flour is left? While I'm reading this problem, just as I would when I'm reading a good book, I'm imagining myself going through the motions. This is a real world problem. It's not happening to me right now, but it's realistic and it could happen to me in the future. Perhaps it's even happened to me in the past. Either way, just like a good book, when I'm reading it and I'm imagining what's happening, I'm building the images in my mind, that's what you need to be doing. In fact, some of the times you can actually just build the images right there on paper. The old saying that pictures tell 1,000 words is not a lie. As I go through this problem, I'm going to be drawing some pictures representing what the problem means to me. I bought a bag of flour. Draw a picture of a bag of flour. I used 2 3/4 cups for pizza dough. Here's some pizza dough. And I'll attach to that how much flour I used, 2 3/4 cups. I also used 4 1/3 cups for bread. So here's some bread. The drawings don't have to be perfect. They don't even have to be good. You just have to know what your pictures are representing. I used 4 1/3 cups of flour for my bread, so I'm going to attach that fraction to the bread. Continuing on with the problem, if the new bag had 20 cups of flour, how much flour is left? Well, my new bag of flour that I drew a picture of is over here. So there's my new bag of flour. I'm going to attach to that how much flour I have, which is 20 cups. Each of these is in cups, but it's not necessary to label them all at this point of the problem. We do want to make sure that we label them when we find our final answer. Now, so far, all I've even done here is draw pictures and assign the numbers that I recognized in the problem to my pictures. I still haven't even really focused on what the question's asking, but that's the next thing I need to do. I must make sure I understand what the question is asking so that I answer it properly, because there's many things I could do with these numbers. The question is how much flour is left, and I usually box my question. And now I have to start to think about how I'm going to solve this problem. There's usually a couple ways you can do it. One way would be to write a mathematical equation in order to solve it. That's something that we're used to and probably prefer. And we will write a mathematical equation for this problem, but sometimes I find it easier just to kind of work it out first and then write the mathematical equation to prove that it's true. So when I go back and I look at the question, how much flour is left, I automatically assume that there isn't going to be as much flour left as there was when I started with. I used some flour, so obviously the bag of flour that I got originally is going to have less in it. I'm already kind of predicting that my answer is going to be less than how much I started with. I started with 20 cups of flour in a bag. I know from the problem that I used 2 3/4 cups for dough, and I also used 4 1/3 cup for bread. So I used some of that flour up, therefore I'm going to reduce the amount that is left in the bag. That should be dwindling as I use it. So this is where the fun part for me comes in. I have to find a strategy for figuring out how much is left. Well, if I started with 20 cups of flour and I used 2 3/4 for dough, I know I could subtract 2 3/4 from the 20 cups to see how much is left. But then I also know I would have to subtract again because I also used 4 1/3 for bread. So if I were to solve the problem in this order, I would first have to subtract 2 3/4, get my answer, and then subtract again 4 1/3. And then I would have my final answer as to how much flour is left. But there are other ways to attack this problem. Rather than subtract twice, I might also look at it as trying to find the total amount of flour I took out of this bag. If I wanted to find the total amount, I would then have to add my two fractions here. This would tell me the total amount I took out of the bag, and then I could subtract that amount from the total amount that is in the bag, the 20 cups. You can choose any direction you want to go with it. Personally, either way, I'm doing two mathematical problems. But I prefer to add. I like adding fractions, so I would add both of these fractions myself and then subtract it from 20 cups. So let's do that. Let's find out how much flour I actually used. In order to do this problem, I'm going to have to find a common denominator. That denominator will be 12. My multiple on top will be 3, which will make that numerator a 9. On the bottom fraction, my multiple is 4, which will make the numerator also 4. I'm adding these two together, so I'm getting 13 twelfths. 13 twelfths is improper fraction, so we're going to want to change that, which is equal to 1 and 1/12. And our whole numbers 4 and 2 is equal to 6. When we add our whole number 6 with the 1 that we have on our mixed fraction, we get a grand total of 7 and 1/12. This is the total amount of flour that I've used from my sack of flour over here. Now we're going to take that total amount, and in order to find out how much flour is left in this bag, we need to subtract how much I used. So we're going to start with the 20 cups that we had in this bag, and we're going to subtract from it 7 and 1/12. Here we have a whole number minus a mixed number, and the whole number is on top, so we have to realize that we're going to have to borrow here because what we have is 20 and 0/12, and we're going to want to increase that numerator, so we're going to make this 19 and put that 1 over here in the form of a fraction and make that fraction have the same denominator so we don't have to do any extra work. And now we can subtract 12 minus 1 to get 11 and 19 minus 7 to get 12. And here we have solved the puzzle. We started with 20 cups of flour. We used 7 and 1/12 cups, and that leaves us with 12 and 11/12 of cups. When you write out the answer to a word problem, you need to write it out in a sentence form. So I would write this answer as there is, or are, 12 and 11/12 cups of flour left. Now I'm going to wipe this slate clean and show you how you could solve this, creating a mathematical equation. I didn't wipe it completely clean because really I do want you to draw pictures to help you understand what's happening. These pictures are going to be helpful in creating a mathematical equation. If you recall earlier, there were a couple of ways we could have gone about solving this. One was to subtract 2 3/4 from the 20 cups of flour in the bag and then subtract 4 1/3. I chose instead to add 2 3/4 to 4 1/3 first. I'll be honest, part of the reason I chose that is I don't like to borrow with subtraction, so that helps me avoid that possibility. So now let's go back to the question and ask ourselves again, what is it the question is asking? What is the unknown number that I'm trying to find? Well, I'm trying to find out how much flour is left. When I do finish my equation, it should tell me how much flour is left. It will equal how much is left. I'm going to use L, a variable, to take the place of the unknown number that I'm trying to find. I'm obviously using L because it is the first letter of the word left. Any letter will suffice, so pick a letter that is meaningful to you, one that has something to do with the problem. Let's continue on. What is it that I did when I solved this problem? I decided to add the two fractions. So I'm going to write down exactly what I did. I added 2 3/4, 2, 4 1/3. I added those first, and then I subtracted that answer from 20. And we need to let the reader of the problem know that they have to add these two numbers first, and the thing that tells them that are parentheses. So we'll put parentheses around that. Once they've solved this problem, they need to subtract it from 20. So the 20 will have to go in front of it. This may be a difficult part, writing out the equation. When you're finished, you can always check it. Just remind yourself of the scenario that you built in your mind, what you did first, and check your mathematical equation to make sure that you'll be doing things in the same order. You could always solve this mathematical equation and see if it comes out to the same answer you got earlier. Another way to make sure that you're on the right track and your answer is reasonable is to do just exactly that. Check your answer for reasonableness. A way to do that is to simply round numbers off and make them easy and quicker to add, subtract, multiply, or divide. So for instance, if I were to look up here and just take these fractions and round them off, and not even be careful about rounding them off, just round them up. I would round 2 3/4 up to 3 because it's more than 2. It's actually closer to 3 than 2. And 4 1/3, I'd just round that off to 5. Even though 1/3 is really closer to 4, you could round it off to 4 as well. It's really your decision. If I did that and I added 3 plus 5 to get 8, and then subtracted 8 from 20, I would end up with 12 cups. If we recall, our answer was 12 11/12 of a cup. I can see that by rounding off, I can do the math faster, and my answer seems reasonable because I started with 20 cups of flour and now I only have 12. Well, that's reasonable. I used some of it. If I had instead gotten an answer of, say, 25 cups or 30 cups, I'd be able to look back and know that I did something wrong because the answer isn't reasonable. If I'm using it up, I can't possibly be ending up with more. Checking your answer for reasonableness is an absolute must. Because if you see it's not reasonable, it gives you the opportunity to go back and try something different. The last bit of advice I can give you is don't be afraid to fail. Expect the problems to be difficult because they are going to be, especially the first times you try them. You will get better at it. It will become easier with time. Understand that they're challenging and you will fail, but be persistent. Understand that with failure comes information. Utilize that information to try to improve yourself. It won't be very long before you're just like me and not seeing these as the nightmare that you think they are, but the fun that they actually are.